right, everybody, welcome to another webinar here at Route Consultant. If you've never been here before, if you're just seeing us for the first time, my name is Josh Gregory. I'm the Vice President of Education here at Route Consultant. All that means is that I'm here to help educate everybody on the new space, but also all of the things that are happening in the logistics industry as a whole, and also the things in particular to FedEx that are happening every day and every week. If you're not familiar with Route Consultant, our team ran hundreds of routes across the country in both P&D and line haul. And today, like I said, our real focus is to help current contractors understand all of the best ways to apply the learnings from both ourselves and other contractors to be as successful as they can, and just find ways for us to all come together and learn from each other and optimize and be successful together. And then for anyone who's new looking into this industry for the first time, our goal is to help educate, make sure you know what you're getting into and that you're going in eyes wide open to be as successful as you can once you get into the space. Before I go too much farther, though, I have a quick disclaimer to read. So Route Consultant is not endorsed by and is not recommended by Federal Express Corporation, FedEx Ground, or Amazon. Route Consultant is not sponsored by, is not approved by, is not associated with, and has no connection whatsoever with Federal Express Corporation, FedEx Ground, or Amazon. Now, if you've been here before, welcome back. Or if you're watching live and this isn't your first rodeo, again, welcome back. The way that we do these is that we will go through some content, some updates, and things we want you to think about. And then we will give you a couple of quick updates on events and new listings. And then we will have time for pure Q&A at the end. So whether you have questions about anything that we talk about today or just any questions in general about the space, we'll be here to answer them. My ask is that there is a Q&A button at the bottom of the window. So if you do have questions, type them in there and we will get to them in the Q&A session. So for today, I'd say one of the questions that we get asked the most often is just one of those, as I'm thinking about growing or as I'm thinking about getting into the space, what size do I need to be before I add a manager? And then the next question is, and then how big do I need to be before I add a second manager or a lead driver or layers of management regionally? And it's really tempting to give a simple answer here, but there is a lot of nuance and context that needs to be discussed as you're thinking through this decision. So what we wanted to do is talk through all of the different factors there and really help you think through management and how to tackle it at any size organization. And to help with that, we have brought, of course, Dave and Amy Byers back on to give their perspective. So I see you guys there, Dave and Amy. Why don't you guys give a quick hello and intro for those who may not have met you before? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, I didn't want to giggle while you were doing your thing. So I'm Amy Byers. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Slicker Trucking. We have P&D, line haul, custom critical. We're 7-day in a couple terminals, and we are express in one terminal.
I'm Dave Byers. I'm president of Slicker Trucking, and same thing. Like Amy said, custom critical, ground, and express.
So a little bit of everything. So you've kind of seen all the different layers and all the different sizes and
yes.
Can really kind of give us these thoughts here.
Yeah.
Now, before we start thinking about all of the different layers, I really do think it's important to set kind of ground level on what a manager even is or should be. So let's start just like minimum. If you're thinking about a BC, what at minimum are the things that you need a BC or a manager to do? And then what are maybe some of the other things that you look to add on to those minimum responsibilities?
So a basic BC, we kind of break those into your dispatch duties and then kind of your outside operational duties. So at a minimum, our BCs at the local BC level, so these are on-site managers, dispatch duties, communicate with the drivers, execute the DRO plan. So there was a plan the night before, execute what that plan looks like, make adjustments for call-offs, which is huge, make a plan for bulk so that you're not leaving any stops behind, but you're also not, bulking out a truck and upsetting drivers. make a plan for volume. So if one area came in maybe heavier than another, because dro wasn't accurate, maybe that is something that we need to do. So that's kind of the base dispatch duties. Make sure everybody has a scanner, make sure they have an iPad if you're using ground cloud or whatever, navigation. Make sure everybody has the tools they need to do their job, and out they go. From there, in the morning, they're also going to handle service mail, which is any communications from FedEx regarding your 85s, 04s, 27s, any service failures, complaints, disputes, or missed deliveries. And then also have some conversations about any type of safety concerns with the terminal. So that's kind of blanket at the terminal, what to do on a daily basis. From there, RBCs, are they training? So is it a research training that they're required to do for ground cloud, or is it a new trainee, a new candidate? Are they giving road tests? So all of our BCs are capable of doing road tests at a minimum. Will they be running a route? So is your BC a driving BC? Or are they going to cover bulk or just kind of help offload some, general volume or cube, or sweep a pickup just to kind of either a morale standpoint or avoiding a service failure. They'll then work on the schedule. So our guys they do schedule on Wednesdays. And then it's pushed out 2 weeks so that we have a little bit of a buffer on call offs and, oh my gosh, I forgot I had a birthday party, picnic, whatever. We have a couple weeks to react to that instead of the next day. Dro, they'll do that in the evening. Our guys are doing it between 9:30 and 10:30 at night. Takes about 15 to 20 minutes on the norm. If they're making any changes, obviously they can work on that during the day. They're doing audits. So whether that's scanner audits, peak Isaac, scanner audits, tire audits, iPad audits, uniform audits. So whether that's a morning kind of like, hey, is everybody wearing their uniforms? Or if it's like an asset type of audit, whether, we need to make sure we can find all of our easy passes. So your toll road passes. So kind of find all those, double check tire audits so that we can stay ahead of maintenance. And just general things like that. They can also do ride-alongs. So if there were any type of safety or, anything they found on lytics, they could do a ride-along and kind of mitigate some risk there. And then from there, they can also do maintenance and truck shuttling, and then vetter coaching, which is definitely a tricky one for managers, for BC level managers. Vetter coaching definitely takes a little bit of human management as well. So it's not just the trucks, the boxes, and get them out the door. So those at a minimum, I think, and I know it's a lot, like at a minimum, it's a ton. But your BCs, I mean, it's a lot of work. So if you're an AO doing your BC job, this is kind of the conversation that you're probably doing all of this and then managing the bills and all of the other things that come along with running a business in general.
Yeah, that, just like you said, that is a lot of potential responsibilities, a lot of hats that a BC may have to wear, or as depending on the organization, they may be wearing all of those.
Mm-hmm.
As you're thinking about it, if you identify a need to add a BC, is this something where you're ever successful bringing somebody in from outside?
So we have brought people in from outside, and it has to be very strategic, because if you have drivers that are interested in being a BC and you have not coached them or had the conversation or given them the opportunity to step up, you can hurt feelings and not get the buy-in. If you go into it saying like, nobody wants it, or nobody's maybe at this level, or we have a different level that we need the expertise for, we're hiring for this type of expertise. We have brought in managers from outside we had a guy that was a Domino's pizza manager. He managed 2 to 3 shops, had to deal with drivers. had to deal with delivery trucks. So that was great. He worked out really well, super successful. So that was, the management experience is great. The problem I would see with maybe, an investor level bringing in somebody like that is someone has to train them. So they have to learn best practices and kind of the FedEx way from someone. So that's the hurdle of bringing someone in outside. So if you're growing or and you have a BC that's successful, or you've been doing it as an AO and you want to hand that down to somebody, I think hiring outside is a great option, because you can really vet experienced people management, which sometimes hiring the best driver is not the best manager. So that's sometimes what we get caught up in, because that guy's really good at what he does, but then you promote above their kind of capacity, right?
When you're thinking about looking at these drivers, and I know sometimes it's not just, the best driver, but what do you look for? Do you look for people to self-identify, or do you call them out as like, hey, we want you to start preparing for a potential manager? Like, what do those conversations typically look like?
Well, what we found over the years, our drivers that are more flexible to bounce around area to area and not be stuck in one route every day. The guy that says, hey, I'll cover wherever you need me.
Floater.
Yeah, we call that a floater. That driver naturally becomes management material. And it's just always kind of shaped out to fall into that kind of that realm of where we land as a business. And they've really turned out to be some really, really good managers.
With that the core values and the core kind of personality traits that a floater route requires: flexibility, understanding, problem solving, stress management, right? All of those things come naturally with someone that's good at floating. Not to mention, you're training them on every possible route you have. So you're training them on rural, which is different than city, which is different than industrial, which is different than business heavy, which is different than maybe express and hospitals, right? So you get them in this role and you really see how they do in each route. And as they, succeed and can move from route to route and kind of flex and problem solve, you see that that kind of emerging leader. So I think that's kind of, I think that's one of the things that we've implemented over the years that's really, whether they, and sometimes it's a conversation, like, hey man, if you want to be a leader, we got to see how you perform in this area. And they buy in and it's a good test. We also have the team lead roles, which is not quite a supervisor, but it's a little bit more responsibility. They're kind of over a geographic area. So they're kind of first responders. They're helping their people on the dock. And you can see, kind of firsthand how they're dealing with the morning stresses and their own bulk and their own.
And a team lead manages only a small group of drivers. So they're managing like 4 to 6 drivers in their little cluster that touches wherever they deliver. So so it kind of gives them a little foot in the door to help manage the business from a smaller, kind of beginner level.
Okay. Now, I think you touched on it earlier too. Like, let's say you've brought one of these drivers that either they've self-identified, they're a floater, whatever it is, and you've decided to make them a BC. How often do you deal with other drivers thinking they should have been the BC, and how do you control that conversation? And on the flip side, do you ever have managers that feel like they're going to be replaced when you add a new manager?
So we have, obviously with size, we're able to promote. So we do have a layer in between Dave and I, regional and senior BCs that kind of float around to the terminals to make sure that we have a physical presence in the morning at kind of an AO level at every terminal. It's just important. Obviously, Dave and I can't be everywhere at once, and it's important to have that leadership just to even just touch base. So, yes, twofold. The question was, what do you do when another driver wants to be a lead? So we are definitely more so in the line of show us what you have. naturally and you'll be recognized. But we do have an application on our website where they can apply and give us the reasons why they want to be considered for a team lead or considered for a bigger path. And sometimes they think lead may be the only way to get further ahead in your company, whereas maybe they're just a really good driver and senior driver, more driving capabilities, more, rescue, sweep pickups, things like that. Like maybe they're just better taskers than actual leaders. So that's a conversation to have with someone if they're just looking to grow their career. But if you have people that are just wanting to be leaders, I think it's, make sure that they're communicating, get those applications. But we always say, avoid the audition, right? Like, it's like an interview. You go in and you're your best person for that snapshot in time, like the honeymoon phase, right? And we say it's not an audition. We need you to be hardwired like this. We need you to care all the time, not just when we post the position for team lead. So we have a conversation quite often where we're like, well, that guy was kind of like always coding boxes and never really cared. And then all of a sudden the team lead position came up, and we want to avoid promoting people that just want the extra money, right? They want the financial promotion that never seems to work out for them or us. So that's the conversation between, do you want to be a senior driver and just make more money, or do you really want to lead people and be part of what we're doing here at a bigger level? And yes, we have had conversations. We typically require someone to be with us for a year before they move into a lead position, because I think you kind of get past that audition and you get past I'm going to hit the ground running and I love my job, right? Like we want to see how good you are when it's ugly, and how you handle that stress. So a year, and then obviously having those conversations. And a good way to test those people, again, is to challenge them with those lead roles or the floater role, or even giving them some small tasks, and just say, hey man, I see you have a little bit of bandwidth and a little bit of capacity. You're done early. When you get back, can you double check that all the boxes have service crosses on them? Can you help me with a tire audit in the morning? Can you go help the new guy, train, and see what that looks like? So there's ways of kind of qualifying internally whether your person's going to make it.
Gotcha.
And then that helps. It kind of helps naturally call out the people that, don't want to do it, or separates the people that are going to rise up naturally.
Yep. Now, what was this? The second part of the question too was do you ever have managers feel upset
Yeah.
at a manager, like feeling like they're gonna, like you're just putting in somebody new to replace them?
We communicate and over communicate. So we have a lot of conversations, and we actually had one today about, should we add another layer of management or should we add another manager? And it all comes down to workload. If Amy and I recognize someone is kind of maxed out, then we'll talk about it and say, maybe we need to put in another layer, and maybe it's not another manager. Maybe we need to start a safety manager side where he maybe deals with the fleet and the maintenance at one terminal, and kind of just assist those guys with smaller things to take a little off their plate, but not really be an equal to their level. So we get real creative with that, but we over communicate with our managers so that they know we're not trying to push you out. We don't think you're doing a bad job. We just recognize that maybe you need a little help, and we don't want to stress you out. We want to make sure that you can get off the clock at some point too. Yeah. And we want you around for a long time, so we don't want you to get stressed. And
rotate dro. So not everybody's up at 10:30 at night working. So we kind of, allow that. So communication will really kind of kill any of those rumors and off-putting feelings. One of the things that we actually found organically is that bulk route that we typically have in one of our bigger terminals was always kind of the route for the guy that couldn't do a ton, right? Like it was like, oh, you can only, you move kind of slow, or, you can't get the technology or whatever that looks like. We would put that guy on that route, and you would have 9 to 10 stops, but huge deliveries, right? And we would always kind of put that guy in that route. And a couple of years ago, we flipped the bulk route on its head, and we actually put that position as a supervisor, because we realized that if you put somebody in a problem solving role, even though they're higher paid. So the 9 stops didn't financially feel like a break even, right? That if you put somebody in that role, they were capable of 2 tripping bulk. So they would do our northern area, come back to the terminal, make sure nobody from the northern area left anything, double check it wasn't sneaking under the dock or under a belt line or anything like that, right? And then he would do the south part, but in the middle of that, he could sweep a pickup, he could help somebody that was struggling. And they could, just problem solve naturally. So it ended up becoming, it went from kind of the zero role to the hero role. And that took a little bit of time for us, but that position has also now served as kind of a manager farm, because we get to see how they naturally manage their own time. And are they the person that takes like, hey, I'm done, I got this like bandwidth to kind of sit and chill? Or are they like the, hey, who's next? What can I do? Who needs help? How are we going to get out of here with 100%? How are we going to clean up all these stops? Who's struggling? So it's kind of, like I said, between the lead positions and the bulk kind of floater routes, those are kind of our manager farms. And then,
It frees him up too. He's not real busy in the morning, so he can kind of like intermingle with the drivers and say like, hey, do you have anything that might not fit, a tire stop or something, a trampoline that maybe you need help with?
sometimes it's just morale too.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's the guy that wants to get, or the girl that wants to get to their kid's function, or they're just having a hard time, and they're just, before you burn them out, can you lend them a hand? So, we go back to that people thing, right? Quite a bit, but, our BCs, our managers, we've identified over the last 2 years that they were hired to manage boxes and trucks. They weren't hired to handle some of the things that are thrown at us from a people standpoint every day. They're not human resources managers. They're not formally trained in people management. And today's mornings sometimes feel like, you need to be friend, counselor, mom, dad, brother, cousin, HR person, right? Anything in between. So, so it's definitely challenging these years, the last couple of years, to find people that can fit that mix, and that it doesn't shut off. People are calling off in the evenings. So, the family support that they need to have, and the understanding that the BC job is kind of doesn't have a 5 o'clock cutoff.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we've danced around it a lot, and you mentioned that you've already thought it through it, even today, of that you were thinking about adding a manager. But
Yeah.
what are the different things that go into the decision for adding a manager in your business? And in general, how do you think through when the right time is to add another BC or another layer?
So I hit it with the 3 B's. Broken, building, or back off. So is your contract broken so you don't have enough time to manage it? And things you can't wrap your hands around it. You just too much work to get around it. Are you planning to build or grow? Or do you want to take a step back and not be so hands-on? So I think those are the 3 areas in which, you and backing off could just be back off from the BC role, right? It doesn't mean that you're backing off from your business, but you can't, those duties that I gave in the beginning, you can't manage the things that FedEx is requiring of you if you're growing and you're not managing the compliance side and the KIs and the financial piece and where your maintenance goes and getting ahead of your finances if you're in a truck and on the dock every single day. Now you need to be there, you need to be present, but to what degree, so again, broken. I think Dave's nodding his head. When things start getting shaky, to add another layer, with whether you're growing, and then obviously if you want to get your hands off a little bit, which the hands off piece is great, because each one of these have an investment layer, right? Like this is a non-earning overhead type position in most cases. So can your business tolerate it? I think at the broken standpoint, you can't help but not, right? It's a lesser of 2 evils. At the building, it's an investment. And at the back off, how much is that freedom and that kind of, your time, how much is that worth to you?
Yeah. And so I think, so taking those three things, I think, something we've always said here is about 8 to 10 routes is when you want to add a manager. Around 15 might be when you add a second.
Mhm.
I know that that can have a lot of nuance depending on the situation. So as you're thinking of those three things that can impact a business, the broken, the building, or the back off, are there scenarios you've seen where you had to add more management a lot faster than it at that like 15 mark, or are there some where you've seen managers capable of handling a lot more than just 8 routes, like, and just kind of talk through that a little bit, just so people can have some other examples.
Oh, we just started Express in our one terminal. We had to have another layer of management there to get these Express packages out, and not only to learn it and to get it started, but we found we needed an extra manager just to manage that day-to-day operation, the time commits, and not only the time commits in the morning, but getting the packages back in the evenings. So maybe we need a manager to go out and sweep the trucks to get the pickups back before the Express cut at the terminal level. So that that's a layer that sometimes you have to consider. And also miles. One of our terminals, so many miles in a day. I want to say like 4,700 miles a day we run. That needs 2 managers or even 3. We have a senior that helps there every day as well. Just because there's so many miles, if you have a flat tire here or an issue here or issue there, they have to be able to spread and get out and get the problem solved. So those two are immediate, come to my head, reasons that you'd want to consider more layers of management.
Yep. We also have one contract that we have 12 routes and we have just one manager. She's awesome, amazing, just and it's 6 days only. So she's okay working the 6 days. And she's really kind of got a handle on it. And our seniors kind of poke in, and Dave and I'll poke in, and we watch her metrics and make sure that she's not, stressed, but she's kind of like, if I need a day off, you guys can cover the 1 day off, vacation. But from a standpoint of having another manager here full time, we'd kind of be standing around. She's like, we kind of have it buttoned up. So, if you're good with it, I'm good with it. And we just kind of really stay in communication. And, if she were to throw the white flag up, we'd need to hire. Right. Right. But we trust her, and she's been successful for several years now. So we're kind of okay with that one.
Okay, and you pointed to something really important there, which is that from time to time you kind of check in and look and make sure they're performing well. So a couple of questions that really I'm going to ask, and then in theory this could be multiple webinars. But when you're your managers, what are the right things to do to monitor them and check in on them, and also what are the right pay structures?
To monitor, today I was at the terminal. And I checked on the fleet. I just walk around, and I'm real easy to get along with. But I check tires just at random. I check the lights as the drivers are doing pre-trips. I'm looking at our drivers to see if they're in full uniforms. And if I don't see something, I just bring it up. Hey, why is this guy not in a full uniform? They say, oh, we're waiting on shirts, or we're waiting on pants, and they have the answer. Then that's the best hands-on, living it, dropping in. And I know Amy drops in the terminals too. And we're not questioning what they're doing, but we're just following up, just making sure that everything's going good. And we're just kind of feeling little issues here and there. I had my power tools today. I was working on a couple of things I saw that I didn't like. They were minor, but I said, hey, we could be fixing this kind of stuff as we're hanging out and we have some downtime. So,
and then the DSW is kind of
the
your
DSW,
go-to.
I live in it. It's kind of like our FedEx Bible. The DSW will tell me results from yesterday. So I'll sit with we have a little space so you can sit down at the terminals, and we'll go through the DSW, and we'll talk about the day before. We'll talk about the current day, stop counts, service from the day before. I can see code 85s. We'll hit those. We'll look at them. Why are we using this code versus this other code? Code 34s, 04s. We talk about that, and we just talk about everything. And then I bring up the vetters, and I bring up the lytics, and I say, why do we have 6 uncoached videos here that are 3 days old? Why aren't we in this every day? Or or good job. Thank you for having us at 0 and
Mhm.
keeping everything up to date and current, and all the drivers assigned to the right trucks, and just make sure everything's kind of buttoned up day to day. And it's important to tell them good job, and not just point out all the flaws, because they deserve it. And it's kind of not thankless, but it is nice that they want to hear that they're doing a good job and that we recognize that they do a good job. So we really, really, really try to tell our managers and our drivers, good job. And sometimes we'll have a safety meeting and we'll just say, good job. We don't have anything really safety
Nothing
to talk about.
pressing today.
Yeah. But with me and Amy, when we do that, it trains our BCs to do the same. So if I'm not there every day of the week, they're telling the drivers, I'm confident that they're telling the drivers, good job. And thank you for doing a pre-trip and opening the hood and checking everything out and feeding back, giving us the feedback that we kind of need.
So from that, what Dave's talking about as far as like dropping in the terminal, that's I mean, for us, because we have the senior managers, but he's there maybe once a week if one of our managers are there also. So, he can take that day. He had a BRM meeting today, or a safety meeting at the terminal. So he takes that opportunity. It was at 10 o'clock to go to that terminal that day, kind of double down. I'm going there anyway. Might as well come in and check on everybody. The DSW checks half an hour, maybe top of the day, bottom of the day. So you're not looking at a ton of time invested in double checking, you know what I mean? The work, double checking to see these flags, if you will. If you know where to look on the DSW, the flags stick out pretty quickly. And then you're going to know about safety. You're going to know about lytics as well. So those are, very quick, high level things that you can engage your BCs on. Now, from the second part of that question, I'll hit it real quick based on financials. So you can incentivize your BCs based on performance. So you can do an incentive based on KIs. You can do based on drop in safety metrics, right? So KI in that regard, but if they're coaching at the right time, so if they hit those metrics, you can do that. Service metrics over a month or a quarter, you can review with them. And then we just started reviewing them for turnover. So, the BCs are never really, it kind of just happens to them when a driver quits, but it really doesn't just happen, right? Like there's things that are going on in the terminal that they're not picking up on, that causes someone to quit, especially when they quit the wrong way. Bringing a truck back, or no notice or something like that. So we're really trying to hold them accountable, because as of late, that's where the most unnecessary expense is, that line item of hiring and retraining. So if we can get them to know that that's a metric, we reward on that. And then at peak, you can do service metrics, you can do volume metrics, you can also do a bonus if they're in a truck doing a route, so give them kind of an incentive, so they get a driver rate, and not full, but they get kind of a flat bonus rate. Their rate goes up to a driving manager at peak. We can do something like that. And then you can decide, based on the affordability, kind of what that looks like. You can also bonus them on a 6th day. Depending on how you pay and depending on what your state allows, you can kind of figure out what the legal way to do that, but to reward them for the mandatory 6th day.
Yeah. And like I said, there are all kinds of things we
All
can
kinds.
talk about there. I think it's exactly what you pointed to, but for us, management bonuses and incentives were typically us looking at what were the biggest challenges in our business today, what are the things we need to improve, and incentivizing them to achieve those things. Because at the end of the day, managers know the things they have to do. They know all the things that you're looking at, the DSW vetter. But if there's other things that you need them to put extra attention on, like turnover or thinking through those types of things, an incentive is a great way to do it and make sure that you're closing any gaps in the business, and just kind of saying, this is where you need to spend your time, your extra time, any of it, spend it here. And we'll pay you for it.
Yeah.
And I just also wanted to double down on something you said before, Dave, around just one, inspecting what you inspect when it comes to your managers and just being there. Like that should never feel like you're micromanaging, you're just being there to check in on them and make sure that what they've said to do, that you're there to make sure they're actually doing it. But I just want to like double down on the fact that saying they did a good job is so important, because 99% of what they hear all day are complaints and whining from drivers, from FedEx, from everybody around them. So you're the only one really who's going to even have an opportunity to tell them they're doing a good job. And so sometimes that can be, the difference between a manager staying for 5, 10 years, like some of what you all have, and them leaving after 6 months. So those little things can really impact the health of a business.
Yep.
So I know we've talked about adding a manager, adding a couple of BCs, but when you think back over kind of your journey in the FedEx space, what was the point where you started to add layers of management, and what kind of triggered that for you all?
Go ahead.
I think I probably managed 10 to 15 routes by myself every day. Lived it, really couldn't get away from it. And I think what happened with us, we hired an internal vacation coverage, just to help cover routes when there were vacations. And when he wasn't running routes, he was helping me do odds and ends and run trucks. We were off on Mondays those days, so he would come in on Mondays and help run trucks and just help with general maintenance. And that's kind of how we developed into like this manager. Like it was just kind of like a helper for us on the off days.
Now the team leads, that was actually built out of turnover and morale. So we needed boots on the ground, more people to buy in to what the culture was and what our vision was, to be more of the, not necessarily cheerleader, but to have the goal of servicing FedEx and making sure the boxes were out and doing a full job, right? So that was the whole kind of reason that the team lead came, is that I needed, in a bigger contract, I needed more people to kind of infect good people. So that kind of taking the bad apple spoils the bunch, we kind of flipped it on its head and said, well, what if we put one person over 4 people in their geography, and they were kind of our champions, if you will, and our ambassadors that would not only hold people to the culture, but also be the eyes and ears to hear if something kind of scuttlebuttles were going on, or somebody was frustrated, or somebody's having a hard time at home. We could get that because we're only one person, right? And you got 40 people on the dock, or even 10 or 12 people on the dock. And to put this in perspective, what that seemed to work so well. And also for first line questions like, what code do I put on this? Or the guy's not home, or the dogs are out, or this box busted open and there's soap all over the back of my truck. Like, what do you do? Right? All these everyday, like small ticky-tacky questions that can make, if you give them to the right people, they're super excited to be the expert on those questions. And it takes the load off of our BCs. So this seemed to work so well geographically that we even have 2 to 3 leads in our 10 to 12 contract, and 12 to 12, 10 to 12 route contract. So even in a small contract where you're like, oh my God, I can't afford supervisors, you really can't afford not to, because you're talking about managing 3 to 4 people, and it's not a huge amount, right, of an investment. It doesn't have to be $1,000 a week person. It doesn't have to be a $200 a week raise. I'm talking a gesture, a percentage that puts them in a leadership role, but they're not, accountable for anything managerial, right? They're accountable for their route and responding to people. But they're not, accountable for the service and all the things that a BC would be accountable for. But we found that we can address low-hanging fruit, as far as like low-hanging opportunities to have conversations with people. They want to move up. They're frustrated with the way Dro sorts their packages, like all those things that can add up and make for a miserable day for a manager. We have 3 people on the dock in a small contract that are really moving the wheels. So and again, this kind of spearheaded out of morale boosting, right? We call it putting the gas can down. When when someone's at a truck and like their fire is burning, like don't go over and be like, yeah, me too. And right, the whole contract goes up in flames that day because everybody's me tooing. So can you put somebody on the dock, not only to help load, but to advise in the best way? Like, well, I'm leaving that bulk. Like, nah, let's see if we can fit it. So it's that extension of management. And when we found that that worked, we did grow it, right? So there's some other duties that the team lead has. We send a text message group. We send the DSW to them every day so they can keep an eye on their people in their areas and see who looks like they're struggling at 10 and noon and 2, instead of waiting until 6 o'clock when everybody's back to the terminal and say, oh, well, there's Joe again. He's out in the middle of nowhere with 40 stops left, and he's not going to get done. So, so we've added some tasks and responsibilities, but really it was culture based at first when we started the team lead, and now we've implemented it in our line haul division, because obviously we're not up at night, where we work during the day. So we have team leads that are first responders in the evening. We have team leads that are first responders in the day. We even have a lead on our maintenance crew. He's kind of the prioritization guy. So it's really an affordable way to build strength and buy-in in what you're doing, but also add those responsibilities to give people that path, to see if they can help. And then
They're a relief valve too.
And the relief valve.
They're
Yeah.
the relief valve to the BCs. Just like the BC is a relief valve to us as the AO. So the team leads can filter some of those. Now, one of the toughest things we found whenever we first brought management in to help was, I would have to say, even though I love to deal with the drivers, I would have to say, hey, you should call, even though I have the answer, you need to call the BC. And now I encourage like our BCs to say, hey, you could maybe call the team lead and get that answer, even though they have the answer, but to use that chain of command to take some off their plate so they don't get overwhelmed,
and to empower the team lead to have
empower
that.
the team leads.
Yeah. So it's definitely grown, and it's continually evolving. So
So just one last question before we get to some open Q&A. So whether someone's getting into the business for the first time, or if you're a current contractor trying to add, a new contract, a new CSA, if you're trying to get a good feel for a current BC, how they're, what level of success that BC has, or where the gaps might be, what questions would you ask when you're trying to evaluate it of the owner to really get a sense for that?
I would, from a standpoint of, high level, I would ask about safety. I would ask for a safety report on the drivers, to see, even though when you start a new contract, the safety score starts over. I would see, if it hasn't been remediated. So if they're not drivers that are no longer with you, or you haven't retrained and you haven't seen progress, you're going to inherit those problems. And if the BC isn't training right, that is a direct correlation between the safety program, right? So if you have a guy that's kind of lax and just go out there or the routes are too heavy, so the drivers are rushing, it's a good question to ask about your safety, because that's ultimately what's going to hurt you the most. Service, are they qual cert? So can they train your own people? Are you inheriting a contract, or are you growing into a contract that has the ability to train your own people? Or do you have to outsource it, which is an expense? And then their opinion on driving. So we don't like when our managers are in a truck. Obviously, that's not the best situation, but we have heard of contracts where the BC is like, I'm out, not doing it. So I think just from a culture standpoint, you could ask some questions about like, how far are you willing to go to protect the service and to protect the contract? And I think that those are some kind of base questions that I would start with.
Right. Okay. So that was a lot, and I see a ton of questions. I already know that we're going to have more probably questions than we have time for. I'm going to blitz through the new listings, because we have 10 new listings this week. And so I'm just going to go quickly because otherwise we won't have time for any of the questions. So 10 new P&D listings this week. So I'm just going to kind of give high level of where it is and how big it is. If you have questions on any of these, we've got all the info on our site. We can give you all the financials, all the details. First one is out of Ohio. This is 14 P&D routes at $800,000. Next one is southeastern Ohio. This is 34 P&D routes at 2.25 million. So this is a really large one if you're looking for that size with 43 employees. Next one's out of Texas, 16 P&D routes at 1.27 million. Indiana, 9 P&D routes at $600,000. Another one out of Indiana for 12 P&D routes at $1 million. And then we've got a South Carolina one for 15 P&D routes at 1.125 million. And then a North Carolina one at 8 P&D routes at $545,000. And then another one out of North Carolina, 14 P&D routes at $975,000. And then 2 out of Tennessee. One is 27 P&D routes at 1.8 million, and one is 13 P&D routes at 1.285 million. So again, we got places across the country right now: Ohio, Texas, Indiana, South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee, all went live this week. If you have questions on any of those, reach out to our team and we will make sure to give you all the details. Also, a couple events to highlight. If you are in Las Vegas, we will actually be there October 1st for a happy hour, completely free to attend. Free food, free drinks. We'd love to see you there, and you can network with others in the area. And you can register for free for that on our site. And then we also have a new investor summit. So if you are still new and trying to get into the space, we do host these new investor summits at our workshop, and we actually have one on next Friday. So if you are interested in that, you can still register to attend it. It is almost full though. So if you are interested, next Friday coming up, and we put that in the chat as well. Okay, let's get to some of these Q&A, as many as we can here. A couple here from Iffy. So I'll start with this first one. So he's asking about using driver vehicle inspection reports. So he may not be familiar with some of the things that drivers have to do on the scanner. So kind of talk through what does a driver typically do to kind of sign off on anything in the vehicle, and are there anything else you guys do differently, either with a driver or a manager, around making sure those vehicles are inspected each day?
We use Ground Cloud. So there's a pre-trip in Ground Cloud that you can set up the criteria that you want to check. So you can make it as detailed as you want with med cards and as crazy deep as you want it to be, or you can make it kind of as generic as you want to. So we use that, and then we also have this really cool QR code that Amy designed, and we put it in. Every truck has it, and if they record an issue or they have something happen, they scan the QR code, they type up what's wrong with the truck, it sends automatically. It goes into a spreadsheet that goes to our mechanic shop, but it also copies all of us management, so we know like this truck's going to be out of service, or we say we need to get a mechanic there tonight to fix it. So that's something we found that we really needed to have to do direction for the mechanics, and it's really helped streamline a lot of our maintenance and kind of back to the DVIR. Just that, because we needed more than what we were getting just out of the scanner.
So one of the things that we focus on with the QR code differently than just Ground Cloud for maintenance, and this kind of, I see the questions, it kind of hits all three of those top maintenance audit type questions. So the Ground Cloud is for pre-trip and DOT related, right? Like get out, like do your lights work, all those things. And then our other maintenance code is for more mechanical things that may not be necessarily DOT, but my camera's starting to fall off, or my truck is making this funny noise, or it's starting to do something, or my seat is uncomfortable, or the bulkhead won't lock, right? So there's all these kinds of things that aren't necessarily you can put them in the comments part of Ground Cloud, but this is more of a quick form on our website that they can fill out, and it goes right to our maintenance team. Before we had an internal maintenance team, it would go to our managers, And that would serve as a list of what needed to be written up and what trucks needed to go in for service and what could be fixed internally. So the managers, our managers are able to, do basic wiring, change a headlight, change a bulk headlight, things like that to get them back on the road quickly.
Yeah, and even if you're not using, no matter what size business you are, some kind of form for ingesting that information and putting it in one place, whether it's just a QR code or it's an app like GroundCloud or something similar, that can be done at any level. So like they said, they have an internal maintenance team. Before that, it was their managers. Even if you don't even have a manager, if you've just got 8 routes and you're managing it all yourself, these are great ideas to have these things go to one place as opposed to just getting sporadic updates throughout the day or nothing at all. Sometimes that might be what happens. So at least having that as an option.
We actually put these QR code stickers. There's one on the corner of kind of the windshield, like where you would put your oil change sticker light. There's one on the door, and then there's one on the bulkhead door. So the idea is that we don't want them forgetting throughout the course of their day, like, oh man, I forgot to do that. So it's throughout their truck that they can just do a quick scan. And, man, this thing is always really hard to pull. In our rural contracts, the doors get super sticky with dirt and grime and things like that. So they can report that while they're thinking of it. And it's super quick, scan, fill out the form, hit submit, and then, move on. So we don't let things roll and the frustration.
We've been real adamant too. We know drivers aren't mechanics. So we tell them, you don't have to try to diagnose the problem. Just tell us what's going on. It's thumping when I go around a turn. And then we have a starting point to go in and really try to find the problem, because we found a lot of drivers weren't writing stuff up because they didn't know what a ball joint sounded like or a strut going bad. So we said, just tell us what's going on and we'll figure it out. Yeah. So no matter as silly as it sounds, if it's making a chirp, just right, it's making a chirp, and we'll figure it out.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So beyond that, and I think you've also mentioned sometimes having a safety manager in some of your contracts. Are there anything else on an ongoing basis you do to kind of to raise the level of safety or the safety standard with your drivers?
Yeah, we have safety meetings every single week. We set a date at like tomorrow, one of our terminals, Thursdays at 8 a.m. There's a safety meeting. We don't change the time. We don't change the date. Everyone knows if they're usually coming at maybe 9 in the morning, they know on Thursdays they have to be there at 8. And we have a safety meeting. And sometimes the safety meeting is as simple as good job this week. And then other times it's anything going on in the whole operation, anything we've had happen. It could be a line haul issue we had. We'll talk about it P&D. We'll talk about P&D issues with line haul. And anything we need to talk about, we'll bring up at that meeting.
And it can happen in one terminal. We have the same safety meeting in all terminals, so that we can really enforce, kind of from a company standpoint, all those things, whether it's from FedEx as new policies or new technologies, or whether it's something that we saw that we just need to kind of really kind of drill down on. It could be uniforms. I mean, it could be, something as simple that we're seeing in an express terminal that we need to pull to a regular terminal because it's just better practices. And then we also do safety memos. We'll do safety emails, and we post on our website.
Okay. And okay. So anything beyond safety that you send on a recurring basis? Like, do you guys do any kind of newsletter or anything on a regular basis?
So our websites is kind of our Facebook page is kind of like a newsletter for us. We have a feed, so it does for people that aren't on Facebook, they can still get the information. It's on our homepage. So we kind of put everything out there, and everybody's welcome to go visit our website and kind of see what we do, slickertrucking.net. Under driver resources, that's kind of our tab where our drivers can find all things that are their resources, and everything else is just kind of on the homepage. So we celebrate birthdays, we celebrate anniversaries, which is another conversation, babies and grandbabies, and we do safety pushes. We do, any type of
services.
Yep, community services, anything that we need to get together on. We also push, like, it's back to school. So there's going to be, kids kind of in school zones. It's summer break. So kids are going to be throwing balls in the middle of the street. It's the inspection week in June, right? So the DOT is going to be out a little bit harder. It's, wear your seatbelt month, seatbelt awareness month, or, text and driving month, distracted driving month. So we focus on, celebrating some of those things with safety.
Well, this week's truck driver appreciation week. So
Yep.
we just stuffed
200.
200 little brown bags with snacks for the drivers that we're going to distribute for the rest of the week.
Yep.
So
Just little things. So, but on our website, you can kind of see what some of those things look like.
David's asking, are you out of either 440 or 432 terminal?
we run line haul out of the 440 terminal, and we run line haul to 432, but we don't have any P&D out of either of those.
Yeah, we used to.
Yeah, we used to.
Okay, question from Tim. I know we talked about it, and I think you briefly mentioned it, but how do you think about the compensation for the team lead? Like, is it, how much do you add on to an existing driver?
So typically it's between $50 and $100 a week extra to start. And like I said, it's a great investment into that management role. It gives them the ability to kind of move the needle, so that the next review, they'll, be positioned for even more. But that's typically the range. And again, it's dependent on the territory, the amount of responsibility, seniority, how many you have in one, is it just 2 across 12, or do you have 3? Are they sharing responsibilities? Are they going to step up and do a little bit more? But that's pretty much the range of the difference between a driver at their level and then the lead at their level.
Is that the same for line haul?
It's a little bit more for line haul. Line haul would be, I don't know, like 100, I think 250 to 300 extra a week. And it depends, again, like what shift they're on and what their duties are. Our team leads are sending over dispatch, so they're doing, scheduling and communications, so a little bit more.
Yeah. And there's a question here about line haul management. That's a whole nother conversation if we were trying to
right. Yes.
That's Alex.
Yeah, well, yeah, but just on this one at least. So if you were to buy a route that is farther than you would be willing to drive, do you always make sure you have a manager there? And do you think about managers differently when it comes to line haul being close to the terminal?
So our line haul is very regional, and we're all pretty close. We did not have a manager for a long time. You could probably skip and not do a manager and maybe just do a team lead if you were far away and needed somebody to kind of oversee. Our biggest thing was we were burning the candle at both ends, right? We were up at 6 in the morning managing P&D, and then managing the guys. As our P&D guys were coming back, we were kicking into gear to get the night guys out. So, and then they were coming back at 6 in the morning, and then we'd start the cycle over again. So we started with a manager because we went from 2 line haul runs to 10 real quick. We bought an operation with 8 runs. So that just immediately kind of kicked in. Dave managed it for a while, so I kind of did day and he did night. And then obviously, again, back off was our big B, right? Building and back off was our big B. So we had to figure out a way to manage that, not just as partners, but as a married couple that we never saw each other. So so we hired a manager, and then we were able to grow kind of exponentially. And then when we only have, so for 40 line haul runs, we have, which are day and night, we have 1 manager, but we have 3 leads. So in that regard, you can extend your management by just adding leads, trusted leads, and you could even put in a supervisor if you needed to. But those leads on the line haul side are pretty much our nighttime managers, on duty managers. And we do have 1 open, so it'll be 4 leads and 1 manager that can manage that regional operation. Again, we're only about an hour and a half from each terminal. So, and our management is kind of based in the middle. So we're in a little bit more of an advantage when it comes to that. But I do know, I mean, there's guys that have runs out of our terminal that manage contracts in Florida, which is not hands-on. So, there's the opportunity. Again, they have a management team there as well.
And I think I would agree that if you're gonna look to add something and you're smaller, the first thing is almost certainly somebody at night, some kind of night dispatcher, manager in the nighttime, because I know a lot of people are not super excited about having to handle the 3 a.m. calls, and that's often the thing that you're looking to offload most quickly. So,
Yeah, and it was.
perfect. Now, I think we're at end of time here. So, Oscar, I see your question. It's also so if you guys could answer that in 2 seconds, when do you have team lead on line haul?
Well, I just
This
kind
isn't line haul. This is when do you for P&D? When do you add a team lead? Like how many?
he says what, after 3, 5, 10 routes? Yes. So it depends on your culture. It depends on the complexity of your routes. The more complex your routes are, whether that's from a geography standpoint, as far as getting people out to go help and rescue, or sweep pickups, whatever the complexity level, pickups, whatever, you may need more than a normal. But like I said, we have a contract that's 12 routes, and we have 3 team leads there. And I'll tell you, for the extra, $150 to $300 a week that it costs, it's such an investment to get that type of culture pushed through, and not just from a culture like live and breathe like we want you to and kumbaya. I'm talking like the responsibility and the accountability to care about the boxes, care about the stops, care about your service, care about your safety, wear your uniform, all those things. Just more people setting an example of great behavior and great service has just it's just exponential. And many of those people have moved into our management roles. So, it's a great, like I said, it's a great farm to test people for what they're potentially capable of. Maybe lead is all they got in them. And that's okay, because you can't have 30 leads, right? You can't have 30 managers, you can't have 30 drivers. But it does definitely, kind of weed out who kind of is ready for that next step.
Perfect. All right. Thank you. That is all the questions. You guys were amazing today. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Dave. It's always a pleasure to have you all on here. And thank you, everybody, for joining. We will hopefully see all of you all next week on the next webinar. See you, everybody.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks, everybody.